Hi everyone, Helen Blunden here. I hope you're happy, healthy and well. It's time for a new review today. And today I have the pleasure of sharing some of my life lessons out of this fantastic book that was quite accidental in my hands. And I guess it's the first time I could say, thank you YouTube algorithm for showing me the short about this particular book, because there are people out there raving about this book. And it is the book that is touted as the greatest novel you've never read, simply because you've probably never heard of John Williams and you've probably never heard of Stoner. But this is doing the rounds. It's going really gangbusters online. And so I thought, righto, okay, let's see what this book is about. Let's see what all these YouTubers like me are reading. And I loved this book. I loved it so much that I read it a second time, and I loved it so much that I went out and bought his other few books. Well, in particular, I just got Augustus and Butcher's Crossing. He's got one more, because I loved how this guy writes. He published this book in 1965, and I think this book is actually loosely based on his life, because it is a story of an academic. It is a story of a university professor in English literature and about his life. And even though we read about his life and we sit and think, oh crap, he's just led a really sad, lonely life, I think he led his life the way he wanted it to be led. I think in some way he made all the choices in his life and he was comfortable with that life, so therefore who are we to judge how he lived? We see him grow up from the time that he leaves his parents' farm, and his parents were kind of like those American parents, stoic, very hard, very firm, people of the land. And he gets an opportunity to go to university, and they encourage him to go to university so that he could do a science degree and then come back and help him to the land. But at university, he gets enamored, he falls in love with English literature. And it's the way that John Williams writes this bit in the book that you can't help but fall in love with the writing, and can understand how he falls in love with literature, to the point that he changes from science to English and sets off a new journey in his life, despite, I guess, the parents feeling sad about his choice. We see John Stoner growing up and going through university with a few friends, and his friends to me all denote different people who have come into our own lives, and different types of people in particular. And these three people, the three musketeers, or call them whatever you will, basically represent the different people that we see and will meet in our life. There are people like stoners, who are the idealists. They are the people who follow their dream at the expense of everything else, and see the good in people in everything that they do. There are the people like his other friend, Gordon Finch, who play the game, who know when to toe the party line, and can go through life and go through the internal politicking and understand their way in the world, to the point that he doesn't ruffle feathers. And there are people who feel like David, his other friend, who dies fighting in the First World War. David was someone who took life in his own hands and really thought that life was there to be lived, and it was a bit of a game, and he would do whatever he wanted to pass the time. If that meant enlisting into the army and going off to fight in a different country so far away from home, then so be it. I saw his three friends as the three different types of people that we might meet in our lives, but also maybe the three different personas that we would take on in our life. And at times I thought to myself, have I been a David? Have I been a Gordon Finch? Or have I been a stoner? And a lot of us would probably feel that we are a mix of all three. But Stoner, to his credit, stayed true to his own idealistic view of the world, because his entire life and love was for the love of literature, and what it gave to him. We see Stoner getting married to Edith, and Edith has her own problems. And the more we read about Edith, the more we realise just how unhinged she is. But there is snippets of things in Edith's life that makes us question as to why she's that case. There's a lot of hanging questions. Her relationship with her father, her relationship with her auntie, why she was so hell-bent on marrying Stoner before this idea that she was off to travel to Europe, why she was the way she was. She was really, really bizarre. And she made Stoner's life so difficult. And she swapped and changed. She was obsessive in some cases, and in other times she wasn't. She just completely ignored him. We also see Stoner and his relationship, his beautiful relationship with young Grace, his daughter, and how Grace grows up with her father and what he gives her. But as she grows up, she gets more and more swayed and influenced by her mother, who we don't know whether her mother is jealous of Stoner, but her mother actually pushes her to change or morph her personality. And when Grace grows up, she then also makes some choices about her own life and steers her life on a completely different track. The more we read about Stoner and the more we realize about how he grows old, how he reaches middle age, how he also has a beautiful relationship with another English literature student, Catherine, how he's a man of his own. At the university also, there is a big part of this book is about his professional relationships with other people in his academic faculty of English literature. And you see all the internal politic. We get introduced to Lomax, who is I guess a cripple. He's hunched. He has a stiff right leg. He is arrogant, and he doesn't listen to anyone else. He has his own very strong opinions and quite eccentric. And there's a part of the book that also there could have been some kind of relationship between him and Edith, because at some stage they kissed. And this is where I've been thinking, the more you read this book, the more you have these haunting images that kind of stay with you, where you're trying to grapple and try and make sense of these vignettes that is put into your head as to trying to explain the relationship of people and also trying to explain their actions. But nothing comes out in certain. Lomax, I hated the character of Lomax. Lomax represented to me everything that is awful in the world, everything that is the opposite of someone who should love literature. Lomax is someone that we all know in our work. And as I was reading this book, I thought to myself, John Williams had put in this book a complete life of someone who is wholeheartedly devoted to his love of literature above all else, and that somehow he stays in awful relationships with his wife, but at the same time, over time, there is this love that comes out in some way, and we come to realize that who are we to judge someone else's life? He made his choices. He feels as if he's had a good life, even though, yes, he may not have stood up to those who wronged him, like his wife, like Hollis. But at the same time, he had good friendships in Gordon Finch, who stayed with him for his entire life, and the love of his students as well. But ultimately, he lived his life and he died a quiet life. He died in a way like his own professor, Arthur Sloane, did, in his chair, surrounded by his books. For me, this book it's a beautiful book. It's one that should be read, and I highly, highly recommend it. You'll be swayed and influenced and moved quite deeply by the way that John Williams writes about the character of Stoner. His writing is beautiful. It is evocative. This is what writing is. I loved it. When we talked about this book in our book club, all the book club members loved this book. They rated it as one of the best books they have read in 2024. I'm so glad that they had said that. I did try to vary the books. I was surprised that it was unanimous. Everyone loved this book. And also they did mention that this book reminded them very, very strongly of another book, an Australian book, which you may or may not have read. And it is another book that I would highly recommend. And this book is by A.B. Facey, an Australian author. He is now long since died, passed away. But it is called A Fortunate Life. In some ways, these are books about people who are stoics, people who have everything flung at them, but they have this quiet presence about them, that they know what they want, and every choice that they make in their life, they accept it and they move on with it, and they still believe they have a fortunate life. And in some way, these two books were very similar to each other. Now, this book is a book that I have bought so many times. I've lost track of how many times I've bought this book. I've had so many copies in my life, and each copy I've given away as a gift to people, because it's these kind of books that make us appreciate what life is about, how we all have ups and downs. Some people have more downs than ups. Through it all, they remain stoic. They see the good in people. And these are the type of books that I feel that we should be reading nowadays, especially at a time where we might feel so despondent, so disheartened, so disappointed, so negative, so cynical, so uncertain, so unsure, anxious, depressed, miserable. These are the people who have been through so much more and could still see the value of life. Both books, highly recommended. But please, 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 if you've read this book, please let me know what you think. What were your life lessons out of this book? Thank you for listening, and thank you for watching. Bye for now.